Hello everyone and welcome to the MBH YouTube channel for our monthly catch up with our CEO Callum Laing. I'm your host Lisa Maynard-Atem. So hi Callum, how are you?
Hey Lisa, I'm great, thank you. Very great, and yeah, really looking forward to this call.
Yep, me too. So I wanted to kick things off with a chat about the employee shareholder ownership program, and because I think it's a fantastic kind of program, so I thought we could kick things off by having a little chat about that.
Yeah, so there's kind of two parts to it that we covered in the half-year report for shareholders. So the first part is more kind of around good governance and ensuring that directors in the company always have a decent stake in the business for the, for what they're making decisions for. Now, it's kind of less of an issue now for the current board, obviously sort of as one of the founders and CEOs, but everything that we do with MBH, we're really looking at how does this work in 10, 20, 50 years time. And so trying to put in place those good governance and good guidelines that will ensure best behavior for shareholders over the long term. So one of the things that we did probably a couple of years ago now is said that when you're sitting on the board of directors, you're not allowed to sell shares. And the reason that we did that was because there's a temptation, or there could be a temptation for directors to try and manipulate a share price for short-term gains because of their own personal financial needs. And we didn't want conversations going down that route. We wanted people always thinking in terms of the long-term benefit for all shareholders. And so by removing the ability for directors to sell, it's a little bit cruel, but it does mean that they can't sell on the board while they sit on the board. And therefore it also is likely to only attract people who want to be on the board that are independently wealthy and aren't going to be making decisions for short-term financial needs, which is key. So that was kind of the one part of it, is around what happens at board level, and we've just kind of taken international best standards. So one of them is that CEO should have at least 6 times their salary in shareholding. We've decided to apply that to all executive directors. Now, both myself and Vicky Sylvester both own significantly more shares than that, but it's a good principle for the future. And then independently of that, what we realized was that some of the companies in the group, in fact, quite a lot of the companies in the group, when they first join, even though the owner is the one that gets the shares when they join, oftentimes they had deliberately, or they'd already sort of agreed or decided to split some of those shares, sometimes with everyone in the company, sometimes just with the senior management team. And then very often the bonus shares that we pass down to the principals gets separated out to individual employees. So that was kind of happening already. But what we also realized was that those principals were getting more and more inquiries from their own staff about wanting to own shares. And so I think Robinsons was one of the first to put in place this share ownership plan for their staff, which basically said if the staff wanted to buy shares in MBH, that they could take a small allocation of their salary each month, put that into shares, and that Robinson would match it. So great, there's a huge benefit for employees, but of course it's fantastic for shareholders as well, because who better to be owning the shares than the people that are actually doing the work every day. So yeah, it's a great initiative, and lots of companies are now following it. So yeah, very exciting.
Yeah, I personally think it's a fantastic initiative. So no, I think it's great. Something that I saw, which I thought was quite interesting earlier in the week, was something around most investors believing that Brexit will make the UK a more attractive place to do business. Now, for me, I found this quite interesting because obviously Brexit's been quite a polarizing subject here. You've either voted for or against. So I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and get your thoughts.
Yeah, so it's in one regard it's interesting. In another, it's kind of quite typical to something that I see a lot, which is there's quite a difference between the way investors think to the way small businesses think. So if you talk to the majority of small businesses in the UK, I think most of them don't share that view that Brexit has been a good thing for them. And yet, if you talk to investors, clearly, as the research shows, a lot of them think that it will be a net positive for the UK. So it's interesting that we come across this quite a lot, this sort of diverse thinking between investors and small business owners, and I think some of it is around timeframes. So small business owners are the ultimate investors in their business, but they tend to have a very long-term time horizon. They're constantly thinking about creating value, sacrificing profit in the short term, often to create value in the long term. Most investors don't have that same time horizon. Maybe they don't have the luxury of that time horizon. They have to deliver results quicker. And so, yeah, you often find in multiple areas that there is this sort of conflict between ideas between the investors and the small business. One of the sort of our key motto is about connecting sophisticated investors with talented small businesses. But oftentimes you do find that there is a little bit of disconnect with expectations, and it does seem to be that around Brexit. But the nice thing about small business owners is, regardless of the situation, they tend to just roll up their sleeves and get on with it and figure out ways around it.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to be. Well, that we do that often at Burn. It's like, we come across something. It's like, you know what, let's just get stuck in and let's just see what happens.
I think you very quickly figure out, look, if it's beyond your control, there's no point complaining about it. Let's just move on. And most things for entrepreneurs and business owners are beyond their control, so they just focus on what they can control.
Yeah, no, I agree. Something else I noticed as well in the research summary, I saw that 86% of professional investors believe that micro and small caps are currently an attractive investment opportunity, which again I thought was quite interesting. So I thought maybe we could chat a little bit about that and get your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Look, I think the small caps and micro caps have traditionally outperformed bigger cap companies after any examples of downturns or shocks to the financial system. And that's primarily being driven by the fact that they just can react quicker. And so that gives them a strategic advantage. So I think that's what investors are referring to. And But I think what's misleading right now is, as we record this, Google and Facebook have just come out with their results, two of the biggest companies in the world, and their results are just mind-blowing for companies that big to continue to be growing as fast as they are when they're already kind of trillion-dollar businesses is just staggering. So I think what's happening is you've sort of got a scenario where you've got your small caps and your micro caps who suffered with COVID, but have innovated and have come up with new products and new ideas and will rebound quicker. And I think we're seeing that with MBH. Then you've kind of got the bigger, more traditional companies that are probably going to be slower to react, that we're trying to implement policies across very diverse groups and diverse countries, which wasn't really the best way to deal with something as dynamic as COVID. And they are going to struggle. And I think they are going to take a longer time to get back. And then you've got these tech companies that have actually done even better because of COVID. And yeah, I was talking to an investor today, and yeah, we were both saying that, you know, for all the great ideas on diversification and things, you know, it's almost worth just sticking everything into Google and Facebook and forgetting it. It's yeah, it's quite astonishing. We've never seen anything like that previously.
Well, Google, Facebook, and MBH, of course.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
And MBH, let's not forget about that.
I think the difference is that you know, there's stocks that you can go into for different reasons. I think one of the things that I notice with our investors is obviously they see the benefit and the long-term value of owning us, and I think more and more they're starting to realize that yeah, we've huge growth potential if we just carry on doing what we're doing. But I also find that a lot of the investors that we're working with are interested in supporting small business. You know, what they like about MBH versus something like a Google is if you put money into Google, yes, you get a return, but who are you really helping? Yeah. And it's one of the things that I talked about in my last book, Entrepreneurial Investing, is this idea of making alpha, so making great returns, having liquidity, which comes from a public listed company, and making an impact. And you can invest in a Google or a Facebook and get that alpha, and obviously the liquidity, but are you really going to be making an impact? And that's where I think a lot of people are enjoying being part of the MBH journey.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly enjoying it, so. So moving on, I wanted to talk about Glassdoor, because I saw something around employee satisfaction platforms are playing an increasingly important role for investors. And I thought this was quite interesting because I can remember the days when platforms like that were basically used by ex-employees or new employees who wanted to get an idea of what a business is like. So I thought that was quite interesting because obviously the way that they're being used is clearly evolving.
Yeah, and so I was the same. I think, and also I didn't think it was particularly gave a particularly balanced view because it tended to just be disgruntled employees that were the ones that left the reviews. But I think actually what it's more related to is investors are hungry for information. Anything that can kind of give them you know, that edge in terms of knowing a bit more about a business. And the problem with most microcaps and small caps is that they just aren't resourced up to give that sort of level of transparency and data that investors are looking for. Now, it's something that we at MBH work incredibly hard to be as transparent as possible. And anytime we kind of hear from an investor that they're looking for a particular bit of information, we work hard to find a way to deliver that. But we're also kind of unusual in that we are pretty heavily focused on that level, whereas most microcaps and small caps, the CEO of that company already had a full-time job before they listed. Yeah, they were already full-time dealing with clients and staff, and then they listed, and now investors expect them to be full-time dealing with investors. So it's a pretty challenging task, and therefore most small caps do a very bad job of communicating and articulating how they create value in the world to investors. Normally they're very good at articulating how they create value for clients, but there's two different things. Investors are interested in how they create value for investors. So I think what's happened is, there's been a rise in companies that can do expert analysis, where you can you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody in the company or in the industry. So I think it started with hedge funds hedge funds and private equity trying to get an extra edge on how they could find out information. And I think some of those techniques are sort of trickled down, and people are looking for whatever they can find now. But interestingly, it does tie into ESG as well, because for a lot of small businesses, or a lot of certainly the businesses that we end up working with, they spend a lot of time and effort looking after the well-being of their staff, and it's just it's just second nature to the business owners that we work with. It's almost like, why would you even mention it? But clearly there are plenty of companies that tend to think of their staff as disposable and different attitudes. So it is good for investors to sort of get a little bit of any extra data that can kind of give them an edge and a better feel for the company.
Yeah, I was just like I say, it was just really interesting when I saw that, because I can remember the days when we used to look at Glassdoor for very different reasons. So it was just interesting to see how it's evolving and how the use of those platforms is evolving. Finally, for me, as I always ask you every time, is there any news you can share with us in terms of acquisitions or anything in the pipeline that you can share with us?
No. No, but we have got, look, there's lots of stuff going on behind the scenes, as there always is. And again, I think, we've been a bit constrained, or the companies we've been dealing with have been a bit constrained by supply chain and staff and those issues that we touched on last month. But we've got some really cool stuff coming up and some really cool announcements, and in particular, we've got some really interesting sporting related announcements that I'm hoping by the time we jump on this call next month, we'll be able to talk about in more detail. So that's a little teaser for November. Well,
I will definitely be asking you about that. I saw you tweeted about that. I thought, I need to ask Callum about that. So definitely in our next catch up, that will definitely be on my list of questions. So that's it from me. Is there anything that you kind of want to mention, or you want to?
No, it's all good. I'm looking forward to November. We've got some cool stuff coming up.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Callum. I'm looking forward to catching up next month. And thanks to everybody for watching. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Cool. Thanks, Lisa. Bye-bye.